Namaste and greetings. I, Tripta Behra, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Learning. We are gathered today for day 6 of an online international autumn school program, a 1-month immersive online intermediate certificate training course on contours of the public policy in India in the Amrit Kaal. This training program is organized by IMPRI, Center for the Study of Finance and Economics, CSFE. This course will be chaired by Professor Mukul, visiting distinguished Professor IMPRI, former Professor Lee Kuan Yew, School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore, NUS. The panel of conveners comprises of Dr. Devendra Singh, Senior Visiting Fellow IMPRI, Dr. Simi Mehta, CEO and Editorial Director IMPRI, and Dr. Arjun Kumar, Director IMPRI. The experts for today's session are Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay, Professor Mukul, and Dr. Radhika Pandey. I welcome all participants to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for being interested and putting your time, energy, and efforts into understanding emerging issues pertaining to the Indian subcontinent and helping us to bring together the practitioners and participants through this course for impactful policy research and action. We have also shared the course outline and reading resources in your email for your kind perusal. Before we start today's session, I would like to remind the housekeeping announcements once again. Please join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Kindly share your questions in the Q&A box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Kindly ensure that your questions are precise and refrain from making any general comments in order to save time. Now, without further ado, let us start the program. I would like to invite Professor Mukul to start the program and give his opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Namaste. Dhanyavad. We have been over the past sessions having multiple researchers and the participants have been observing the rich tapestry of ideas, analytical frameworks, policy suggestions and implications. So in that pursuit of that, today we have 3 people, resource persons, 2 on public finance, 1 is municipal, 1 is state, and the third one is on India's demographics. We think of India as a young country. It is right now, but in demographics, the aging occurs fairly quickly, and there is a long lead time in preparing for the aging. So when we think of the end of Amrit Kaal in 2047, India would be moderately aging. And what do we need to do now? We will talk about that today. So these are the 3 topics. And given that we have 3 speakers, I will not take any more time and request Dr. Soumyadip to make his presentation.
Thank you, Professor Asher, and good evening to all of you. Thank you, Tripta, for inviting me to this particular session on public policy. And also greetings from Shantiniketan to all the participants. So let me first share my screen here.
So you can go full screen.
Yes. So is it okay?
Yes, yes, perfect.
Okay. So, today the title of my presentation is Putting Data into Action for Public Policy in India, Opportunities and Challenges. So mainly I'll be touching upon three specific issues today. The first one is the event of or the incidence of data deluge that we are experiencing nowadays, and what are the pros and cons of that particular deluge, and what are the challenges that we are facing for putting that data into action, as the title suggests. And then I'll be touching upon something on data related issues on municipal finance, and then I'll finally end up with some of the recent initiatives which the government of India has undertaken in recent years or recent times to streamline this entire process of data-driven policy making. So let me start with a general agreement that the future of development and governance is data-driven, and India's policymaking institutions are beginning to adopt these changes in their strategies. In recent times, data are being generated exponentially at various levels, at various spheres. A data point, as we all know, is a kind of discrete unit of information. There are various sources of data generation, ranging from traditional surveys that we all know from, and nowadays we are having data based on internet, the financial sectors, the mobile data, and others. And the magnitude of data produced by human beings has become huge. Every day it is around 2.5 quintillion bytes. This is equivalent to about 1.72 MB of data, which is created every second by every person, which is astonishingly a kind of 90% of the world's data that has been created in the past 2 years alone. And we know that the design and the execution of any development strategy consists of several smaller and larger decisions, and these decisions are constrained by uncertainty. This can be attributed to the fast pace of change in the economic environment, in the institutional environment, in the technological environment. So the ability to cope with this uncertainty has emerged as the central point of public policy making. The better the information, the better the estimate, and the better the decision making processes. So this is not merely a kind of intuitive analogy. Rather, it provides the foundation of all kinds of data analytics that we are pursuing today. And in the context of public policy making, an awareness about the importance of data analytics and the speed with which these necessary adjustments are undertaken, these are extremely important. And even as we know, even few years back, the data collection involved a laborious survey. So in recent times, we are now collecting huge data at a near zero cost. For example, nowadays, people have shifted to their day-to-day activities online. So what we know as the digital footprints. So people now produce data about themselves and store this data on public and private servers every day. Now, obviously, not all the participants they participate in this digital economy. A majority of the people still they do not have any access to this digital footprint. But among those who are actually performing this kind of digital activities, even the range of online activities are quite limited. Nevertheless, what we are actually experiencing is that we are actually facing a kind of data revolution. I must say that data revolution that is creating new kind of challenges for data analysis, because the data that we are getting, the enormous amount of data that we are getting, these are majorly unstructured. The volume has increased, the velocity has increased, the variability has also increased. So all this require the newer kind of technology, the newer kind of theories, the newer kind of methods for data integration, for data analysis, and for data visualization, and even for interpretation of the data. So let me now discuss the issues a little bit detail in the next two slides. Now, this is the very famous HKMBT pipeline. Now, this actually put these things into perspective. Now, it actually says that the sample size that have been in the range of hundreds and thousands are now evolving into the millions. For example, if you consider the finance and the social media around the world, they are now moved into kind of analyzing billions and trillions of data points every day. and they are now generating meaningful insights, and these are actually utilized to customize different service delivery options. Now, understand the nature of the data. Now, this is the famous 5V framework, which are very important for understanding the nature of the data. Now, definitely, these are the 5 important aspects of any data. One is volume. Now, volume is characterized by the sheer amount of the number of records of transaction that is being generated over the time. Velocity, it is basically characterized by some real-time creation or streaming of data at a constant rate. Veracity is characterized by the trustworthiness and authenticity of the data. And then variety is characterized by the structured, unstructured data sets, and value is finally dependent on all these attributes, and it provides insights to drive growth and also its impact. Now, having said this, it is again, we will all agree on this particular aspect, that it is not just enough to generate data, rather it is important to generate good quality data. So take the example of these digital healthcare data. Just I was looking at one of the economic survey report. It is actually said that in the last 8 years, the estimated worldwide digital healthcare data, it actually grew from 50 petabytes in 2012 to around 2,500 petabytes of data in 2020. So it is important to define data quality to ensure its value in the analysis. So these are the 5 characteristics which are very important as far as the quality of the data is concerned. One is definitely accuracy, which ensures that the information that is entered into the database is correct and it is acceptable for future analysis. Completeness, it actually ensures a comprehensive collection of the information. Consistency, it actually ensures the uniformity in which the data are generated, either in the structured form or semi-structured form, or maybe in the totally unstructured formats. Uniqueness ensures whether the data captured are relevant for our analysis, and timeliness ensures the data are up to date and can be used for real-time reporting. So the question is, how do this nature and quality of data add value to the public policy? Now, by public policy, we generally mean a set of action that affect the solution of a policy problem and the capacity to create public value. Now, the quality of any public policy is generally measured by its capacity to create public value. Now, this aspect or conceptualization of public value is not simple. Broadly, this can be described as a combination of these 3 different aspects. Now, first, the capacity to solve individual problems. For example, we all expect that our health system finds a solution to our health problem, or in the context of the cities, we always expect that all the city waste are collected. We should get the water supply at a regular interval, so on and so forth. Second, the capacity to improve the quantity and quality of life at the macro level, at the country level. Now, this dimension is more complex, and it is difficult to assess it in an objective way, because citizens are different and they have different ideas about what actually improves the quantity and quality of life. But there are certain kind of shared values that can lead to some kind of shared measures. For example, we can think of expected life can be used as a measure of quality of health policy. Okay. And third is the readiness of change, that is assuming is in recent times increasing importance as the world is becoming more and more dynamic. So this refers to the aspect of adaptability. And these last 2 dimensions, that means the capacity to improve quantity and quality and this adaptability concept, these actually increases the importance of some of the characteristics of policy design and implementation. Now, one is our capacity to provide personalized service. For example, the service consistent with the requirement and expectation of each citizen. For example, nowadays we are accustomed to getting a kind of customized service. For example, when we buy a car or when we choose a food in a restaurant. So, in a sense, we sometimes expect the same approach from the providers of the public services. Okay. And second is the involvement of the final users in the process of designing and producing the policies. Now, this particular aspect is known as, in the literature, co-production or co-invention. Now, here the individual and the public policymakers, they jointly design in the service. That means the policy decisions are taken at the level of group of users interacting with the public policymakers. And there are many examples in the case of India. For example, I must mention about the constitutional provision of the Gram Sabha and Ward Sabha at the cities and village level, because these are the constitutional provisions where the people can assemble, they can deliberate, they can design, and they can decide on their village and city level plans and programs. Okay. And third is the capacity to change the characteristics of the service over time, according to the evolution of the personal and societal requirement and expectation. So that is basically related to the concept of adaptability. Now, if this is the case, then so obviously data, if we follow all these characteristics, all these implications quite properly, then data can improve the quality of public policy if we act on all these characteristics. Now, let me just discuss some of the economies of data. Obviously, when we are concerned with the economies of data, because as of now, I have discussed what are the different aspects of data, nature of data, quality of data. But definitely, although data is important, all we agree, but then we need to focus our attention on the collection of data. And when we are trying to focus on this particular aspect, then definitely we need to understand the economies of data. And obviously, when we consider the economies of data, then there are two aspects. One is the cost of collecting data and the benefits that we are accruing from the collection of data. Okay, so in recent times, what we have seen is that we are experiencing a declining marginal cost of data. And this can be attributed to a couple of factors, as it is easily understandable from this particular slide. First, there is an increase in the efficiency of data gathering. As I have already mentioned, that nowadays we are now participating in digital economy. A majority of the, although not all of us are participating in the digital economy. For example, a majority of the poor, they do not have any digital footprint. However, because of the recent innovations, the recent data-driven, the technology-driven data collection processes, the cost of gathering data now has become much lower than it was a few decades ago. Now, even in a case of door-to-door survey, for example, for certain kind of data, we can use technologies to log data online in real time. Now, in that way, we can always avoid the problems of tedious data entry processes. And also, there is a decrease in the cost of gathering data. And along with this, the storage cost of data has also decreased significantly. And one critical concern regarding this data, that how can one make sense of this huge amount of data which we are collecting? Now, fortunately, human and technical capital to process this data has also evolved over time to take care of this issue. For example, we can think of this data science. Data science nowadays has evolved as a separate, well-funded field of study. Now, there are innovative ways to put the data into an efficient use. So what actually I'm trying to convey here is that the data is still relatively expensive to process, but because it may be structured, it may be unstructured, it may be noisy, the data may be heterogeneous, the data may be inconsistent across the different sources, but the problem is not that much severe as it used to be. And once the data is collected, if we process the data properly, then the cost of disseminating the data is also almost negligible, because it is nearly costless to transfer information, for example, through the internet. However, apart from these costs, there are some direct costs and some indirect costs which are associated with the data collection processes. The direct cost, as we all know, the direct costs are related to data privacy and the security aspect. Data need to be stripped of any personal identifiers, and then only they can be aggregated. And there may be several indirect costs. For example, the indirect cost, we may think of the misuse of data. Now, accidental data leaks may have some legal consequences and also substantial financial implications. So again, we can take the help of technology to minimize this kind of, or to take care or to address this kind of direct and indirect cost related problem. So overall, the advancement in the gathering, storing, processing and dissemination actually have lowered the marginal cost of data. Now, coming to the marginal benefits of data. Now, first, obviously, after this kind of data deluge, data revolution, the scope for evidence-based policy making has improved. Now consider the case of, say, school system. Now, in the school system, we can think of two distinct stakeholders. One is the district education officer, and the other one is the group of parents. Now, a district education officer definitely can make better decision if he knows for each school in his district the attendance rates of the students, attendance rates of the parents, the average state score, then the status of the school's toilets. Similarly, if you consider the other stakeholder, that is the parents, they can also make better decision about which school to send their children if they know the average absentee rate of the teachers in their villages, and most importantly, if they can compare that rate in with that of the neighboring villages. So this way, evidence-based policy making can be possible with the help of this kind of data. And better data also can improve the accountability of the service providers to the citizens. For example, nowadays, much of the data about any citizen is dispersed across the different registries, which are maintained by the different ministries at the central level. Now, this is why every time when a citizens need to access any particular new service, then they are asked to collect all the documents again and again to prove their identity, to claim their access to any particular service. So obviously, as a citizens, as a consumer, as consumers, we face the inconvenience of retrieving data from multiple sources within the government system. Now, the government of course can deliver a better experience to the citizens by bringing this disparate data source into a integrated fashion, into an integrated manner. And I'll definitely show later on like how this kind of integration can be possible and how it can actually lead to a better outcome, policy outcome. In fact, data can also potentially reduce the targeting error in welfare schemes. For example, we are very familiar with this particular incident that an individual who is affluent enough to own a car, but he is still availing BPL welfare schemes. Okay, now this is problematic. Now, when the data sets are unconnected, it is not possible for any particular service provider to identify who actually needs any particular service. Okay, and lastly, there is scope for experimenting with new products. For example, a data platform that informs the farmers of the prices of their products across the country. We all know that there was a time when it would have been or rather it was very difficult for the farmer to know the prices, or it was almost impossible for the farmers to know that the prices are higher in the next district, because cost of acquiring such information was huge. The farmers have no way they can access those prices without substantial cost in terms of transport or storage or distribution. Now, consider the case of Electronic National Agricultural Market, the ENAM. Here, we possess the technology to allow the farmers to make their sale online, to lock in their higher prices, and also to arrange their delivery almost seamlessly. So the benefits are simply huge. Data has the potential to integrate their market nationally, and it has multiple benefits. It can reduce the need for the middleman, it can reduce the prices for the end consumer, and at the same time, it will increase the prices for the farmers. So from this last two slides that the discussion on marginal cost and marginal benefit, it is quite clear that the marginal cost of collecting data is decreasing and the marginal benefit which are accruing from that data is increasing. That means the optimum quantum of data that the society should consume is much higher than before. So our basic economic theory suggests that the economy should have seen a kind of surge in efforts to harness and use that particular data. In fact, the private sector investment in data generation process is higher in recent times. However, such efforts have only been partial. Again, consider the case of agricultural market. Now, if the marginal benefit to a farmer of acquiring price information is higher than the marginal cost of that information, he would pay for that information. And the private sector at the same time would cater to this need by gathering and selling the necessary information to the farmers. But this is not happening. Why? This is basically the case. The economies of data that I have just described, it pertains to a society, not an individual, be it a farmer or be it a farm. The economies facing a private company towards data generation process is different from that facing by a social planner. For example, if you again consider this nationally integrated agricultural market concept, then if this market is created, then it would lead to the improvement in social welfare. So this is the case of in economics, what we call the positive externality. Okay, but farm, they are not in a position to get the benefits as such. Why? Because in practice, the farm, it is not possible for the farm to charge the numerous agents or the numerous farmers individual in the economy who are experiencing the welfare gain. So marginal benefit of the private farm is lower than the society's marginal benefit. That means the farm is not in a position to internalize the benefit of social welfare. So if that is the case, then definitely the optimal amount of data that the farm is getting, that would fall short of the social optimum. So to ensure the availability of socially optimum amount of data, the government, they needs to step in. They may step in the form of providing data by itself, or it may create some kind of incentive structure so that the private sector, they step in and they collect and they disseminate the data in a meaningful way. Now, this is basically the government data, because as I mentioned, if we want to ensure the optimum amount of data which is available, then government has a major role to play. And this is basically the government data, availability of government data in the Indian setup. We have administrative data, we have survey data, and we have the transactions data, we have the institutional data. Okay, so these are the different examples of data that we have. The first two are, as we know, they are pretty comprehensive, they are robustly maintained. And for the other two, the government of India is trying to improve and innovate the data generation processes. Some of the strategies which have been undertaken by the government of India, I will discuss in the later part of my presentation. And this is basically the typical data collection or framework in the Indian context. The data collection in India is highly decentralized. This is basically the structure. Data gathered by one ministry is maintained separately from that same data gathered by the AMRA. This is a typical structure. For example, if you consider the data on individual's vehicle registration, that is maintained by one ministry, but for same individual, the property ownership records is lie with the another ministry. Okay, so these data sets are unconnected. So each ministry only has a small piece of information about the entire information about any particular individual or farm. So if these different pieces could be put together, we could find that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and we can utilize the data much more comprehensively, much more meaningful way. So now, just see what benefit that we can have if we merge these disparate data sets by different government agencies. Okay, just say, for example, we can take the help of, say, the data which is available under the Jan Dhan accounts by the Department of Finance, Ministry of Finance, say. And also, you can take the example of the demand for MG Energy award. Now, as we know, the demand for MG Energy can be a kind of, it's a kind of real-time proxy for rural distress. So, if using the Jan Dhan data, if we can create some kind of credit scoring, then this can be provided credit to the districts and panchayats who are actually experiencing distress. So, in this way, we can merge the data, we can merge the disparate data sets, which can be extremely useful in obtaining the necessary richness which are required to design and implement any public policy. Second aspect of the data is that the data needs to cover a critical mass mass of individual or firms for generating some kind of useful property insights. Okay, consider again, say, the case of, say, trading product markets. Okay, if we aim to gather price data on trades across the various products and across the country, then obviously a very large number of producers and buyers, they need to log their transactions on a platform in a real-time basis. Now, this task requires significant initial investment, and obviously the private sector, they may not be interested in this kind of huge investment. Okay, so this is another important aspect. And third important aspect is that data must have a long enough time series for facilitating dynamic analysis for policy making. Now, data that contains all these three features is much more valuable than three different and disparate data sets that possess each of these criteria separately. Now, the problem is that upfront fixed costs which are involved in generating such huge amount of data are significant. So as I am mentioning, the private sector, they may not make the necessary investment required for gathering data that possess all these three characteristics. So even if the private sector put such data together, this might result in a kind of monopoly, which would reduce the citizens' welfare. Okay, so this is in fact another important aspect of data, that data carries some of the characteristics of public goods. Okay, so for example, it is non-rivalrous. That means consumption by one individual should not reduce the quantum available for the others if data is to be utilized meaningfully for the public policy making. And at the same time, the other characteristics of public good is that non-excludability. However, in principle, data can be made excludable. For example, it is possible to exclude people from accessing data. There are many such databases in India which are not accessible and are currently behind the paywalls. And also, there are some kind of data which are gathered by the governments on issues of social interest that should be democratized in the interest of the social welfare. Such data should be made public goods. So data which are generated by the people, of the people, and should be used for the people. And essentially, we actually need a kind of integrated data system. And this integrated data system, this is basically a kind of framework which is helpful for us to
Sorry, Dr. Soumyadip, you might want to speed up a little, because
sure.
you got a lot more to cover and time is short.
Okay, sure. Okay, so this is basically the kind of integrated data system that we are actually having. So we need to gather the data, we need to store the data, we need to process the data, and also we need to disseminating the data. And for disseminating the data, it is very important to create the scheme dashboard. For example, I can mention the scheme dashboard which are available under there are various government schemes which are available at the schemes dashboard level, which are extremely useful for disseminating the data. Okay, and then this is another important aspect, which is known as the 3I concept. And this 3I concept is also very much useful for analyzing the data. That means we need to, whatever data is available, we need to integrate the data, and then we need to create insights from that data, and then that will going to have some very important impact on identifying the unmet needs for most of the citizens. The public policy much more meaningful. Now, let me just shift my attention to the integrated command and control center in the case of smart cities, because this is one particular aspect where nowadays we are actually experiencing the kind of data-driven policy making. Okay, because nearly all cities, they have made meaningful investment in developing centralized big data command and control center, and this is basically a typical data structure which is utilized in the ICCC. Okay, but one thing is that which is clear is that the ICCC, they are the integrated command and control center, they are actually generating huge amount of data, and they are capable of reading data from multiple sensors. Okay, but they require a kind of engine or to aggregate and compare this data to derive the analytical solution. Now, there are multiple vendors who have provided this kind of analytical engines. Now, this is one specific example which is utilized by Cisco Kinetics for cities. Now, this CKC is a platform that integrates all the smart city tools, sensors, and data in order to analyze, automate, and regulate the services. Okay. For example, any data which are obtained through the sensors, they are actually fed into the system. And that data can be anything depending on which sensors are installed in the city. For example, we can have information on the movement of the public transport in a particular city, number of tickets sold electronically, the weight of waste which are collected by the vehicles. And in terms of, so this kind of different data that we can generate or that can be generated in the ICCC. Now, in terms of functionality, the CKC performs three crucial tasks. First is automation. For example, some of this data can be used for automation. CKC can automatically send alerts to a particular municipal engineer if streetlights fitted with a particular sensor indicate that the bulb is faulty. Sometimes this kind of information also useful for real-time analytics. For example, the CKC can change traffic signals based on changing traffic flows, or it can deploy some waste collection trucks on specific routes based on waste collection data. The CKC can also combine this kind of data from multiple sensors to create a solution. And the third one is monitoring, the platforms which are used to monitor data from multiple sources. So in a way, the benefits of this data-driven urbanism, I should say, that can potentially produce many benefits for our cities. It can make cities safer, it can make our cities congestion-free, it can also employ innovative technologies. Okay, but the problem is the success of this intervention and their impact on the ground rests on how the cities address some of the more structural issues and transform their current governance structure. Okay, and here lies the challenge for the public policymaker, because we know that the ICCs, they are used to build synergy between different local and state agencies, but there are some serious problems at the city level. For example, say we can think of a kind of the governance deficit. For example, we all know about the fragmentation of authorities at the city level. Okay, because at the city level, all these services, they are currently delivered by different agencies, and they are operating silos. There are the lack of coordination, which actually makes it difficult to actually implement this kind of solutions meaningfully. And also, another serious problem is the capacity deficit. Okay, because this kind of data demands new type of capacity, new kind of managerial techniques, which the local government, within the local government in India. So the question is, do the Indian cities have the desired knowledge and human resources to deal with these challenges? The data which we are having is not that much promising, because in case of JNNURM, we have seen that out of 67 JNURM cities, almost 38, they have failed to develop an e-governance portfolio. And the situation is specifically very bleak in the context of the small cities. Okay, now having said all these things, now let me focus my attention on the state of municipal finance data. Okay, now we have seen that the Finance Commission, successive Finance Commission, they have mentions the lack of credible information. Okay, and three types of information is generally unavailable in a timely, credible, and standardized manner. First one is the economic information. For the cities are very important units for our economy, but the information on employment, jobs, migration, investment, GDP of the cities, so they are required to understand their true potential as the engines of economic growth. But unfortunately, this kind of data are not that much available in a systematic fashion. In terms of financial benefits, in order to assess the financial health of the cities, we need information on their budgets, on their audited annual accounts, on their medium-term fiscal plans, data on land, property, but these are not properly maintained. And also, we need information on their performance of the cities. For example, we need the service information on service level benchmark, SLBs. We need the information on the tenders and contracts, with the information on their public disclosures, and so forth. However, this kind of data are not available in a systematic fashion. In fact, this is basically the kind of problem in terms of municipal finance that the Indian cities are experiencing. First, ULBs are not required to estimate the revenue capacity, as well as they are not required to make any medium-term and long-term financial requirements. That means at any given point of time, there is no estimates which are available on the amount of financing which are required by the urban local bodies, which makes it difficult for plan for any expansion or for any proper operational maintenance of the available basic urban services. Okay, and also ULBs are not able to leverage municipal borrowings. We all know that the financial position of the urban local bodies is weak, and urban local bodies, they lack sufficient independence, they lack predictability of the revenue. So all this put them at a disadvantageous position when it comes to the question of leveraging municipal borrowing, be it from a public-private partnership or municipal bond or pooled finance. Okay, because we know that the issuance of municipal bond, they require a kind of credit rating by the urban local bodies. Okay, but the problem is weak financial capacity and also the poor quality of data simply undermines the investors' confidence and also the credit worthiness. So ULB need to achieve higher standard in terms of keeping their financial information in a standardized format. And the third one is there is no credible performance management process in the urban local bodies. Urban local bodies are not required by any municipal act to put in place any performance management practices. And also, there is low level of transparency in the finances and operation of the urban local bodies, and there is no scope for citizens' participation. And most of the municipal acts and rules, they do not require urban local bodies to publish their audited annual accounts regularly. And this is some of the practical concerns which have been raised by the recent report on municipal finance, which is published by the Reserve Bank of India. First, there is a problem of missing data. The receipts, expenditure, and borrowing figures which are collected from the municipal corporations had considerable data gaps and missing and misplaced entries. Here, I am considering only the data, which is these are problems which are observed in the context of municipal corporations, because the RBI report is based on 201 municipal corporations. Okay, so if this is the situation in municipal corporation, one can understand the situations which are there, which are prevailing in the other municipalities and the smaller Nagar Panchayats. Okay. Second problem is the underestimation of transfers. Municipalities receive funds from center and the state, but in many cases, they are not separately maintained, so it is very difficult to understand the kind of transfers that they are getting. Also, there is lack of consistency. That means budget documents for most of the corporations are not available online or available only in their respective regional languages. So it is very difficult to cross-check whatever available in the online budget, whether they are proper or not. And finally, there is lack of uniformity. Like unlike the states and center, most of the municipal corporations were not following any fixed and uniform code of budget component. In fact, I had the experience of going to some of the smaller cities to understand their financial positions, but many of their stuff, they do not even understand the difference between revenue component and the capital component of the budget. Okay, so this is basically the situation, and this is the situation of the audit of the financial information. So if you look at the columns, then definitely as far as the audit by any independent and external agencies is concerned, none of the cities, they have performed that kind of audit exercises. And if you look at the third column, it is saying that some of the cities, they have undertaken internal audit, but even that internal audit report is not being made public online. And this is basically the pendency in audit of annual accounts. So if you just look at the last column, then you see that this is the number of the urban local bodies which have not done any kind of audited annual reports over these particular years. Okay. Another important aspect now, why I am considering this property tax, because we all know that property tax is the main source of revenue. Okay.
Sorry, Dr. Soumyadip. You may want to wind up.
Okay.
Okay.
So basically, in case of municipal, can I take 3-4 minutes more?
Yes, please.
Okay. Sure. Okay. So in the context of property tax revenue, we all know that there are many problems with the property tax, but let me focus only on the poor assessment of the properties. Okay. And we all know that there are a widespread use of manual paper-based system of creation and maintenance of the property register. And there is lack of robust provision for periodic enumeration in the state acts, which are creating problem for the property tax. Okay. But if we just look at the experience of the developed countries, then we see that the well-functioning tax system means a low tax rate across a broader tax base. Okay. So if that is the case, then one policy implication that we take from here is that we need to broaden the tax base. Now, if you are interested in broadening the tax base, then obviously one possible solution could be the creation of a GIS-based property register. There are various examples. This is the example of Raipur Municipal Corporation, which actually introduced a GIS-based system, and it actually helped in improving or in bringing 54,000 new properties into the tax nest, which actually increased or which actually broadened the tax base. But the problem is this kind of GIS-based information is not feasible for every city, because these are the three aspects which are available. One is you can take the help of satellite images, but these are less costly, but available information are very limited. You have information only on the property location. You can also take the help of the satellite images from the National Remote Sensing Center. This is relatively costlier, but it actually gives you additional information, property location, property size, and so on and so forth. You can also take the help of drone imaging, which are costliest, but it would give you many information. So along with this, you can also need to give some information, some field survey to check the veracity of the GIS cap. But apart from that, again, the crucial thing is we need to invest on capacity for the existing staff, so that this kind of information which are available, they can be assessed properly and they can be utilized for maximizing the revenue from the property taxes. These are the examples which are already there. And however, why I'm mentioning this, because the enumeration properties, they are not properly mandated in most of the states of our India. Okay. And as you know, these are some of the official recommendations. For example, successive finance commissions, they have made some of the grants which are conditional upon publication of audited annual accounts, augmentation of own revenue, publication of service level benchmark. Now, you know, all of these, they are actually insisting on making the municipal data system, be it on municipal finance or be it on the service delivery performance, much more robust, much more user friendly. Okay. This is the same situation is also happening with the high-powered expert committee report. If you look at the National Urban Policy Framework of 2020, it also brings on all these kinds of information. Okay. So these are some of the recent initiatives which have undertaken by the government of India. And these are definitely helpful for, I think these are going to be very much helpful for improving the financial health of the municipal bodies, and they will be in a better position to manage their problems, manage their problem and manage their city. So I think I must stop here.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for such an informative session.
Right.
I would request Mukul sir to provide his views before we move on to the Q&A session. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Soumyadip. This is really, really an area that is not well understood or emphasized. The state finance departments are very reluctant to divest powers down the line to the ULBs and to the RLBs as well, rural bodies as well. So I think what you have done is really a very, very good piece of research that deserves a much wider dissemination. I'll write to you tomorrow about possibility of that, but please do send me the slides and I'll respond to it in more detail. But this is really we're talking about change versus transformation. This is the transformation that we are going to need to make impact on citizen services in urban areas and in rural areas as well. Because a lot of these technologies, drone and others, can be used in rural areas as well for panchayats and so on. So thank you very much. I think you expounded so much that unfortunately we won't have time for questions. They can write to you and get a response, because otherwise we will not be able to give sufficient time to the third speaker.
Okay, okay, surely, sir. And
become-
also, sir, I'll share some of my write-up with you for your comments, and any critical feedback will be helpful for us.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Our next guest needs no introduction. I would like to invite Professor Mukul to discuss India's demographic challenges with implications for livelihoods, pension, and health sector. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Let me share. Is that okay? Can you see that?
Yes, sir. Visible.
Okay. So
Yes, sir.
the task that was given to me by the organizers, and I thank them for this wonderful program, is India's demographic challenges and what implications will it have for livelihoods, pension, and health sectors. So we are combining the demographic data with the some of the larger issues of retirement, income security, and the livelihoods, as well as the health area. Okay. Now, here is a thought as I usually begin. Teaching without research is like a pond of stagnant water. It becomes stale and contaminated. Research without teaching is like a mirage. We imagine that there is water in the pond. And this is by Gautam R. Desiraju. So one of the grave errors, according to Rajiv Mantri, India committed in science, technology, and social science too, and in demography too, was that to have a near complete separation of research from education and teaching, and is a policy mistake that needs to be fixed. And the reforms that are coming up with the National Research Foundation will address this issue. Professor Shobit Mathur has also said that the single purpose institutions are, or single degree, they are being discouraged under the new economic policy. Let's just look at first in the world. Where do 8 billion people in the world live? China, India, about the same. And USA is fairly large, Nigeria, Indonesia, Brazil, and there are a lot of smaller countries uh, as well. So North America is only 7.5%, South America 5.5, Europe 9.2, Africa 18.2, Asia is where bulk of the population is. Now, what about India's population? This is very, very interesting graphs. And it says that if we look at 0 to 20, and we're saying we are a young country, which we had 500 million in 2000, 48.4%. But notice that by 2050, end of Amrit Kaal, it will be only 431 million, and that will be 25.8%. But our 21 to 64 will go from 48.4 to 59.2. So we will have good demographic advantage even by around 2050. 21 to 64 is the working age. But our topic of aging in 65 plus was only 48 million in 2000. It will be 256 million, 15% of the population in 2050. That's huge. And we have very rapid pace or moderately rapid pace of aging, which we have to change our mindset to try to tackle. And these are the this is in a different form, the similar type of information has been provided. And as it says that the there's also the population by age group. Now, in 2021, the median age, as you know, median means half the people are above, half are below, was 28 years, according to official figures. India's median age of 26.6 is expected to rise to 34.7 years by 2036. So even by 2036, we won't be so young. We will be young, but 35 years is not very young. Broadly, Western and Southern states had higher median ages than India's average, and Northern and most Eastern states would have lower median age. So this variation across states would need to be considered, and we need strategies to cope with that. And this is the median age that I talked about, 28 years of median age in India. here it is fairly large, but once you go up, UP is 25, Rajasthan 26, 26, 25, 22, and so on. So we have got to work on the we'll be aging at a multiple speed that we need to take into account. We'll still have a favorable demographic profile compared to the other countries. And now a lot of people have talked about total fertility rate. Now, what does in demography TFR mean? It means how many children on the average does a woman produce in her lifetime or in a reproductive age. A TFR of 2.15 is regarded as a sort of replacement rate. You are just replacing. Women is replacing herself, her spouse or partner, and 0.15 for statistical technicalities. So 2.15 is what we have as a replacement rate. Now, where is India today? Notice that in 1950, average woman in India was producing nearly 6 children per woman. By 2025, it will be 2. So we will be below replacement rate, and we have a continuous decline in our fertility rate in our history from 1950. And then will be remain below 2. So we need to consider that part of the aging too, that if there are fewer and fewer children, then who will take care of the aged? Will there be uncles, aunts, others? So 2 children is nice, but society has to adjust to it. Now, this is the fertility rate by the state. So we already had 2, and now notice where there are low. Maharashtra 1.7, Goa 1.3, Kerala 1.8, Gujarat 1.9, Odisha 1.8, CG 1.8, Andhra 1.7. So low fertility rate is not a monopoly of states in the southern part of the country. It's all over. Rajasthan 2. 2 is not that much different from 1, and we don't associate Rajasthan with with low fertility. Haryana 1.9, Punjab 1.6, UP 2.4. So, and UP is going down fairly rapidly. So you had very different mix of the TFRs, and we need to manage that and not give excessive importance to one type of data in one region over the other. Now, India's female infant mortality rates drops to the same level as males. That's a revolution, because this is where women are 13 states, girls' IM are same as of or less than that of the boys. And Haryana and others are making good progress on that. Which is West Bengal is lower, Haryana is lower, Madhya Pradesh absolute is high, but still lower, and Gujarat, Kerala, Himachal Pradesh. So it's spread all over, but this is a good way to see the changing, one aspect of changing demographics. Now, here is the life expectancy at birth. Now, notice that women used to live less than men until about 1980. Okay. After that, they have been living a few years more, and that gap is widening as the females get more and more support and policy attention. The Nari Shakti bill that was passed in the parliament is another indication of this. In demographics, we also need to know where people live in India. So where should we be? So this is the population density. You can see this is the area we need to have better governed, grow, and so on, if India is to grow. And then we got coastal areas where the density is high. So the coastal areas need to be developed. These areas need to be developed. The population density is not the same everywhere in the country. Some parts there is very little population density. Some parts it's very high. And that again complicates our policy analysis that we need to make. Percentage of population living in multi-dimensional poverty. Okay. Notice that in Bihar and Jharkhand, this is where we need to have, they've got higher level of multi-dimensional poverty, although all India is 15%. Absolute poverty, extreme poverty, we are coming towards zero. Okay, so this is the multi-dimensional. Unless the fertile Ganga River region is seriously reformed, India's poverty alleviation will remain incomplete. So this is why we need to spend more attention to that region. Now, one of the indicators in health economics is how much money is being spent out of pocket as part of the total expenditure. And we are seeing there's a headline says, out-of-pocket health expenditure share falls, government's share is rising. And that is a good sign because health episodes could drive families into poverty. Very few people in India have private health insurance. Ayushman Bharat, others, the public health insurance schemes are beginning to make good progress. And so that is something we need to look at. Here is the exact data. In 2014-15, the out-of-pocket expenditure was nearly 2/3. Today, it is less than half. Okay, and government health expenditure has increased in the same period from 29 to 41. So this is where we need to see that not only that out-of-pocket expenditure is not too high, but that the government expenditure is also spent efficiently and effectively. Policy implication. First implication is that India, like every other society, must rely on improving total factor productivity on extensive application of science universal to local technology. So technology productivity. How much public policy discussions do you see talks about productivity? Total factor productivity means labor productivity, capital productivity, land productivity. All three need to be improved. And more increases in labor and capital are insufficient for aging societies. They have to innovate, and this is where we are trying to focus. Second, India's aged population over 65 and over 80 is projected to grow rapidly. The pace of aging will be uneven, so healthcare as long-term healthcare arrangements will be needed. So fastest rising share part of India's population is over 80. Now, over 80 means you have Parkinson's disease, you got other type of diseases. You can't function independently by yourself. You need care, and fertility rates are dropping. There are fewer children. Who will take care of the elderly? We can use technology. We need some institutional care, and we need to create a healthy lifestyle in order to see that the elderly remain healthy over a longer period. And the pace of aging will be uneven. We need long-term health care that will come in the next 5 to 8 years, and that the elderly require accessible and affordable services. That's where, the Jan Aushadhi Yojana, where you get cancer drugs, diabetic drugs, others at a much lower price than the market price, um, is very useful because it reduces expenditure of the middle class, lower income, and the elderly. And that is very much needed. So they need services. And that's where Ayushman Bharat is very important, that it will provide health services whose costs are rising, but the insurance is providing that without, at this point in time, cost to the households. And that is the way in many of our innovative services are, are going. So this is the 2014. The government has recognized this. So you have Ujjwala Yojana, clean gas, the housing, Jal Jeevan, tap water of good quality, Jan Aushadhi, many others, and they will be expanded. So they will transform the services being provided. Now, these initiatives center on process reform by service delivering organizations and up-to-date technology adoption in research features underappreciated in policy and academic research circles. Most of these schemes have their own extensive up-to-date performance dashboard. And what Dr. Soumyadip has said, a lot of data is available. The researchers are not taking enough advantage of the trove and the wealth of data which they have to do good research. And we have to encourage the PhD guides to come up with a more socially useful set of research projects utilizing this data. And there is a dashboard which you can go to see, as we don't have time. They provide granular data for much data intensive research at all levels in India. Now, one reservation I have with them, with these schemes, is that there are contingent liability of these schemes on the fiscal resources they have not been researched and documented. So we need to start providing sinking funds, put money aside to pay for those liabilities so that we can manage and they don't come to us suddenly. So, and the policy for the elderly to need to rely as much as possible on having the elderly age at home or near to home as possible. Without being in the community, your familiar childhood surroundings, others, the aged will find it very difficult to keep psychological balance and good health. The average number of persons in a household was 4.4 in 2022. And in OECD, it was between 2 and 2.5. So we need to keep at around 4 to 5, and that 4 to 5 ratio will be good. That will allow elderly to be taken into age at home. Raghuvendra Tanwar, chairperson of the Indian Council of Historical Research, has argued that research at the Rakhigari site of the Harappan civilization suggests that India is the oldest civilization in the world and the mother of democracy. Very selective institutionalized aged care options, however, will still be needed. Even so, as far as possible, social enterprise and not for profit organization should be encouraged in this sector. I wouldn't encourage government to go into this sector simply because government is not very good at delivering services, as you can see from municipal services, quality money, municipal hospitals care. So we need the new innovations in business model. Third, the major policy implication is to devote greater resources to develop skill sets and infrastructure for studies in gerontology, which is the aging. No doctor wants to be in gerontology. Nobody wants to be with old people, which examine all dimensions of aging, particularly non-financial aspects which may impact the well-being of the elderly. Fourth, developing long-term healthcare organizational structures, financing modes that we will need to do, and some of the options of home-based, community-based, institution-based, live as normal and independent life as possible. Now, where do our elderly get financial support? Children is the most important. Own business, bank deposits, don't know, provident fund, government pension, gold, wealth, other sources, financial asset, real estate, movable. So notice that the children, and this is where the family, so Indian ethos is family, not individual. And we need to keep the family ethos and the family civilizational values as long as we can. But you have to also have plan B in case your children don't support you. So how do you do investments and others? So where does India invest? How much? So let's look at the 2021. India is investing mostly in bank deposits, then life insurance, then provident and pension funds, and then small savings and others. Okay, so notice mutual funds are very small as of this time. So what was said in the previous thing, there is a lot of data. We have to granularize it. These are still very aggregative data that I'm giving. Now, this is one of the things about pension economics, and that is in how many years does your money double? And there's a rule of 72. So you take 72 divided by the growth rate, and your money will double in that. So what does it say? If you are growing at 11%, okay, then your money will double in 6.6 years. So let's take our GDP. If our GDP is growing around 6%, 6.5% in real terms, plus 5% inflation, our GDP doubles in 6.6 years. Okay, so this is why you can look at our GDP currently is 260 odd trillion rupees, and you can see how that occurs, and this gives you the average annual return from 1928 to 2022, nearly 100 years. Unfortunately, that data is only for the United States. Okay. Now, in your investments, those who are in the financial markets. You have to be very careful what the cost is of investing. So if you have front load fees of mutual funds, if you have 1% front load fees, then percentage decline in account value is 1%. But annual management fee on top of that, which we pay, is 1%, then 20% reduction in your accumulation occurs. So this is something that you need to keep in mind and keep that. Now let's look at a little bit at the employment. What has been happening in the employment? The formal sector, informal sector, and total. So in 2021-22, we had 565 million people, out of which 62 were in so-called formal, 503 in informal. And this is the COVID thing. The changes are occurring in both the formal and informal sectors. This is by the former Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, Professor Krishnamurthy. He is now India's representative to IMF. These are the regular salaried wage and salaried employees. So persons in rural, in urban, male and female. So we need to increase the female participation too, though it is not as low as it is made out to be, because a lot of type of work that women in agriculture do, women in self-employed areas do, in urban areas, home production is very big. All that work is not counted in the statistical in this case. So women role is not as low in the economy as this makes out to be, but certainly women need to have greater opportunities for economy. Latest data from SBI, State Bank of India research shows 52 million new jobs were created between 2020 and 2023. And net addition was 27 million. So there is a lot of growth in formal sector employment that has occurred. Now, how do you create livelihood generation? 5 mega industrial training institute to be set up in Gujarat. Capacity 1,000 each, deadline this year. And this will be different because industry will prepare the curriculum and teach. So employability will be very high. As technology continues to wreak havoc, one of the most pertinent debate is the skill gaps. What will happen to 800 million children globally? And we have more than 200 million. And that is where the Professor Mathur had talked about NEP, how it is trying to address this particular issue and why NEP is needed. Ravi Sonad, founder, CEO, Enabling Leadership, global non-profit organization, spoke about why these skills are important. And I think because it has the life skills and so on have been talked about and we don't have time, I'll leave it to the Professor Mathur's presentation. The Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, launched in 2017, has provided credit up to 10 lakh to small entrepreneurs. Now that creates livelihoods, but doesn't get included in jobs. That's why we have to be very careful where the data come from. We need to improve our databases. As on 11th August 2023, 430 million mudra loans were sanctioned, with women and rural areas accounting for a substantial proportion. That doesn't mean 430 million individuals. Each individual can have more than one mudra loan. Okay, but we know that the number is large, and if this guys can provide one, each one can provide one more employment, will have a huge livelihood generation that is going on, that uh, is being ignored at this stage. Okay. Oh, sorry. And the Mudra Atmanirbhar quotient has increased from 0.81 for SC and ST to 2.2 and so on. So Mudra has been doing well. It has low non-performing loans, and the average ticket size has doubled in terms of Mudra loans. I don't have time to go into the Mudra details, but it is a substantial livelihood provider. Now we have PM Vishwakarma scheme. Vishwakarma, for those of you who may want to know, the Lord of the Arts, master of 1,000 handicrafts, carpenter of the gods, and builder of their palaces divine, fashioned of every jewel, first of craftsmen by whose art men live, and is a great and deathless God. They continue to worship Vishwakarma. And here you can see that for 13,000 crores, all these trades are now going to get support of 1 lakh or 2 lakhs, and skill upgradation, toolkit incentive for digital transaction, marketing support, and giving them a kind of degree. Just like you say, oh, I've got MBA from Symbiosis University. These guys carpenter can say, I have got this certificate from Vishwakarma Yojana. Okay, and that will increase their market value. So this is the skilling thing. I won't go into this. Now, electricity could facilitate goals of Mudra. And this says how electricity availability has increased throughout the country, though it remains uneven. Sanjeev Sanyal, whom you heard, and Aurora, they have said that we all, just like we encourage entry of business, we also must have exit of business quickly. Should take too long to stop. Quickly, and that would help in this. So let me make my concluding remarks. India will be aging moderately rapidly over the next 3 decades. Its demographic advantage with respect to its competitor is, however, likely to remain. Nevertheless, total fertility rate below replacement rate with variations across the country will have social, economic, political implication, which must be researched and managed. It's going to be a big public policy issue. Elderly need relevant healthcare, including medicines and other services, in an accessible and affordable manner. How many of our infrastructure are elderly friendly? How many cities are elderly friendly? Takes investment to make them so. Since 2014, the NDA government has implemented an innovative approach to old age income security, and they bring greater professionalism, rationalization, systemic perspective to social security organizations. We talked about the schemes, and that new approach is hopefully going to help us manage the uh, the aging process better. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to speak on this.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable insights. We can take a few questions from the participants.
Maybe two, huh?
Sure.
Only two.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hands or put your question in the chat box or the Q&A box. Apologies. Any questions?
They can write to me if they have it.
Sure.
Otherwise, we can go to Radhika, our third speaker.
Yes, I will just wait for Radhika ma'am to join and then perhaps. Till then, if there are any questions, feel free to raise your hands or put your questions in the Q&A box.
Okay. Meanwhile, ma'am will join. Let me ask one question from sir. Sir, you have example of many international various countries. How do you see we are going ahead in terms of our insurance policy for savings, but also for senior citizens and also for health and other employment related policies? What are the good things which we can learn from other countries as well, or where we are lacking? Since our population is huge, how do you see these things turning up, and how do we go ahead with that? We have largely most of our schemes which are made are for poor people categorically as per our constitution. So food also we are giving to 75%. So there is a cap. So for universal coverage of these things, how do you suggest we move forward? Do we have UK or other countries model you can suggest?
No, those welfare states in the West were developed at a different time. And at the time when the global economic wealth and power was concentrated in few hands. Now we have democratization. There are a lot of schemes for the middle class in terms of the different types of savings. Let's just take the EPF, the Employee Provident Fund Scheme of the EPFO. That's a very good scheme for the middle class. NPS is very good scheme for the middle class. It is paying well and anybody can join. And NPS is available to any citizen in the country. Now, insurance, we have to be very careful because we haven't had very good data on insurance is about pricing. And that's why I worry that the kind of health insurance in various health schemes that we have, Ayushman Bharat and so on, we have not calculated how much will be the contingent liability on the state. State is saying we'll pay, but they have not kept money aside to pay and done the study. And I'm suggesting every chance I get for them to study. But a lot of things, take Jan Aushadhi Yojana. When I go to Mumbai, my hometown, I go to Jan Aushadhi Yojana store and I save a lot of money in on my medicines. Singapore is very expensive on the medicines. My own doctor in Singapore, who is from Mumbai, tells me go to Mumbai and buy your medicines. They are cheaper. And Jan Aushadhi is cheaper than the other stores. So a lot of services are being provided and they are available. We are beginning to see. But on insurance, we have to go carefully because our database is weak. Our pricing on the basis of insurance actuary data is not that great. And so I would rather have a lot of co-contribution, make schemes available, provide the good regulatory environment, long-term confidence for people to save. Now, that will be the way we'll be going. We want to have a national type of scheme. We'll proceed slowly, conservatively. That's the right approach. Thank you. Good to see you, Dr. Radhika.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, you're unmuted.
Thank
Yeah.
you, sir. Same to you. How are you feeling? How are you, sir?
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Thank you.
And,
So we take one last question from
oh,
Tej.
okay.
Just
I don't want to take from Radhika's time.
Sure.
No,
sure.
not a problem. We can proceed in the interest of.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an insightful session and also answering the questions. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Radhika Pandey, Associate Professor, National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, NIPFP, New Delhi, for a session on key trends and issues in India's state finances. We welcome you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you. Can you share my presentation?
I will. Okay. Okay. Visible?
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. So, good evening. Today we'll be presenting a very important issue, which is trends and issues in state finances. Normally, what we understand about the financial situation or the fiscal deficit, we primarily refer to the central government. So in this presentation, we'll talk about the overview of state finances. So we'll discuss two parts here. First will be some trends in state finances because that data is available for the first 4 months of the current financial year. So what is happening to things like what's happening to capital expenditure, what's happening to tax revenues, what is happening to the debt, that is what we will discuss on an aggregate basis, as well as some state level variations, because that's very interesting to see. And then we'll talk about some issues in state finances which may hamper which may lead to overall vulnerability of fiscal situation in the economy. Some part of this is related to central government also, but they primarily focus on state finances. So with this brief background, let us get going. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, so this is the first summary indicator that we look into when we talk about state finances, which is on an aggregate basis, what's happening to the state's fiscal deficit. And if we look at the state's fiscal deficit, we see that during the COVID time period, the overall state's fiscal deficit skyrocketed to 4.1%. That was mainly due to collapse of revenues and increase in expenditure by states. And we know that overall, if we see what's targeted under the FRBM, the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, mandates that the fiscal deficit should be 3% of GDP. So during the COVID time, the states could not achieve the fiscal deficit of 4%. And we know that even the central government fiscal deficit increased to 9%. And this is an aggregate figure, this is an overall figure of fiscal deficit where we have summed up the fiscal deficits of all major 19 states and divided by their GSDP, which is gross state domestic product. There will be interstate variation. There are some states that are doing comparatively better on fiscal deficit, and then there are some states which are doing extremely problematic on fiscal deficit. So the range of fiscal deficit varies from 2.8% to 6%. So overall, if we look at the fiscal deficit, it was 4.1% in the COVID year, and then it reduced to 2.8%. Then 2022-23 fiscal deficit on a revised estimate basis was 3.4%, and for the current financial year, the fiscal deficit is budgeted at 3.1%. Now, here it is important to note that FRBM, the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, which governs the trajectory of fiscal deficit, has not been amended after COVID. So to reflect the changed trajectory of fiscal deficits, it has not been amended. So what are we following? We are following the some guideposts or roadmap which is given by the 15th Finance Commission. So N.K. Singh chaired the 15th Finance Commission, and their tenure coincided with the COVID period. So they have given a glide path or a roadmap for reduction of fiscal deficit and reduction of debt from 2020-21 to 25-26. So according to that, for the current year, the fiscal deficit should be 3%. But we also know that central government has given some leeway. We know that central government has given leeway to some states that if they implement some kind of reforms, like if they implement power sector reform, then it's possible for them to deviate from their fiscal deficit by 0.5%. So for practical purposes, the upper cap for fiscal deficit is 3.5% for the current financial year. So this is BE. BE means this is the budget estimate. We will see what happens actually, whether overall the states are able to achieve this target or whether they are undershooting or overestimating or deviating from this target. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot, and there are various rows here, but we would focus on only a couple of them. So what is this table telling us? It is a table showing the snapshot of overall states' fiscal health. And for analysis purposes, we have looked at 19 major states. So what it is showing is the first column shows the budget estimates for various categories like total receipts, revenue receipts, tax revenue, non-tax revenue, total expenditure, and then the various deficits like revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, and primary deficit. So these are the budget estimates. Then what is important is that how have these states fared for the first 4 months of the current financial year. So for April to July, how much have they achieved as proportion of their fiscal deficit? How much of the receipts that they have targeted, how much of that receipt they have been able to achieve in the first 4 months. It gives us a good idea about the trajectory of receipts going forward and whether they will be able to achieve their fiscal deficit targets or not. So that is why this is a very important indicator when we look at state finances, to look at the actuals, what's happened over the last 4 months of the current financial year. And this data is available in CAG website. Okay, so for central government, we get it from CGA, which is the Controller General of Accounts. But for states, we get the same corresponding data from CAG. They come up with these monthly reports and they tell us how much have the states been able to achieve as a proportion of their budget estimates. So for example, let us look at the most important thing as of now, which is capital expenditure. So if you look at capital expenditure, the overall budget estimate of capital expenditure was 7.88 lakh crore, out of which 1.49 lakh crore has already been spent, which means that it is 18.88% of the total amount, which is this column, which is actuals up to July as a percentage of budget estimate. What did we do last year during the same period? That is during the April to July of last year. The same very states were able to achieve 15% of the target. But in this financial year, for the first 4 months, they have been able to achieve 18%. So in other words, states have done better overall. We'll show a heterogeneous picture for different states also, but overall, if we look, states have done better in terms of capital expenditure, because in the first 4 months, they have been able to spend 18.88% of what they have targeted for the current financial year. Last year, during this time, that is April to July, they were able to spend 15%. So that is one key takeaway. The other is also on tax revenue, what's happening. So if you look at tax revenue, the overall lakh crore, and if we look at these two columns, that is the fourth and fifth column, we can see that it is stable. Whatever they were able to achieve last year, the same amount they are able to achieve this financial year, that is around 28%. 28.53% they were able to achieve last year, the first 4 months. And in this first 4 months also, they are able to achieve 28.31%. So similarly, we can have a look at different categories. Also important thing is to look at the year-on-year growth. Again, in year-on-year growth, let us look at capital expenditure. There has been a growth of 49.91%. This means that April to July this financial year, the amount that has been spent is 49.91% more than the amount that was spent in the first 4 months of the last financial year. And if we look at revenue expenditure, the growth is only 7.11%. So the similar takeaway, similar kind of story that we see in central government budget, where they are targeting and higher growth rate for capital expenditure and kind of flattish growth rate for revenue expenditure. The same kind of story is emerging here also, that there is a thrust on capital expenditure. And one of the main reasons we know is that because the central government is also giving 50-year interest-free loan, central government is incentivizing states to spend. So we do see a compositional shift in the quality of expenditure when we look at an aggregate basis. Next slide. So this is state-wise what has happened in April to July, how much capital expenditure has been spent as a percentage of the budget estimate. So here Andhra Pradesh has done the best, because Andhra Pradesh last year in the first 4 months, Andhra Pradesh was able to spend just 10.48%. And in this financial year, first 4 months, they are able to spend 47.79%. So this is a consistent story playing out in this financial year, because even when because we track this data every month, we have seen that even in the first quarter, April to June also, Andhra Pradesh was the top state, and it has done well in terms of fast tracking its capital expenditure and spending almost half of the capital expenditure that was budgeted for the current financial year. Compare and contrast with a state like Karnataka. We know that there have been elections, and after that, there were statements also made by leaders that because of the freebies and the schemes that they have announced, they will not be able to spend a lot on capital expenditure. And that is visible in the data also. If you look at the data, the last row, in the first 4 months last year, 18.54% was spent, and in this financial year till now only 5.36% of the budget estimate has been spent. So it is very low. Then again, states like Maharashtra are not doing well. States like Tamil Nadu, Punjab, these are the states where the pace of capital expenditure has not picked up as compared to what they had budgeted in their in terms of their budget estimates. So this is a very important picture to look at on a state-wise basis, what's happening to capital expenditure. Next slide. This is again the state. So we look at the capital expenditure in 2 ways. We can look at how much they have spent as a percentage of budget estimate, which is BE, and the other is how much they have spent as year-on-year change. So year-on-year change also, we see that Andhra Pradesh is doing well because there has been a massive spurt in capital expenditure for Andhra Pradesh, and then there are some other states which are posting negative growth. That means in this 4 months current financial year, they have been able to spend less as compared to what they spent in the first 4 months of the previous financial year. So this is giving us a picture about the prioritization on capex by different states. Next slide, please. Now coming to tax revenues, as I said that in terms of tax revenues, we are mostly stable as of now. We have, because if you look at central government, tax revenues have not done well because of direct taxes. Corporation taxes have actually contracted as compared to what we got last year. But if we look at the picture on the state finances and tax revenues of state, till now, the position is quite stable. It is quite encouraging in the sense that in the last financial year also till now, in the first 4 months, 28.5% was achieved. And even in this financial year, in the first 4 months, 28.3% of the BE has been achieved. Same goes for revenue receipts. Where we are lacking this time is on non-tax revenue. So this is, again, as I said, this is giving us an aggregate picture, because we should know that tax revenue includes two main components. One is the state's own tax revenue, and the other is the devolution of taxes from the central government. And when we look at this, this breakup, then we get a different story. So let's move to the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the breakup of the tax revenue of states, and here let us look at the orange bar, which is the second bar. Here, what we are seeing is that as compared to last financial year, the first 4 months. So here, this is just it is showing us the breakup of this tax revenue into various components. So we are looking at sales tax, we are looking at GST, land revenue, stamp duty and registration fee, other taxes and duties, and the share of union taxes. So Finance Commission recommends a certain proportion of the central government taxes to be devolved to states, which is currently 41%. And the central government transfers this amount to states on regular installment basis. And this time what has happened is that the central government has fast tracked. They have actually given advance installments to states so that they are able to speed up their capital expenditure. And also because the GST compensation has ended, so some states which are more reliant on grants and taxes from the union government rather than their own tax revenue, they might suffer. So to avoid that situation, what we see is that the share of union taxes has increased from 21% in the last financial year, same period, that is the first 4 months, to 26% in the first 4 months of the current financial year. So this is a key takeaway that the composition of tax revenue is changing, and this time around the central government has spent advanced installments, given advanced installments to states, because normally it gives five installment, but by now they have already given 3 installments and not even half of the year is over. So that is why we see that in terms of the overall composition of tax revenue, the share of union taxes has increased in the first 4 months as compared to the last financial year. In terms of the state's own taxes, GST has the major component. It's around 1/3 is GST, and it's doing well for the states. The GST is one of the major component if we look at the overall tax composition. Next slide, please. So with this, we move to the second part where we discuss some issues in state finances, drawing upon the background that we presented. Yes, next slide, please. Now, here, the first part is that, the state's bond market, like the states have to borrow to finance their fiscal deficit. if we look at the state's bond market, it is quite shallow as compared to the bond market for central government. So what is this table telling us? It is showing the share, it is showing the volume as well as the share of different securities in the overall trading. So what GSEC is the central government securities, T-bills are the short-dated securities less than 1 year, SDL is the state development loans. So if we just concentrate on this column, what it is showing is that the share of state development loans in the overall trading of securities, in the overall bond market, in the overall government securities market, the major chunk is contributed by central government securities, then comes the treasury bills, and then comes the state development loans. So state development loans, even though we know that states' requirements are rising, they need to borrow more. But if we look at the bond market and the kind of trading, the trading volume that is happening in the bond market, the state's bond market, it is a very minuscule proportion of the overall bond market trading that is happening in the debt market. So it's mainly held by the central government securities, then T-bills, and then state development loans. So this is a very important table, and Clearing Corporation of India Limited gives us this monthly data also on what's happening on the trading volume. And we see that it's quite volatile, but the share of state development loans in the overall trading volume is hardly between 5 to 6%, and the major chunk is contributed by the government securities. So this is something which requires policy reform. The state bond market needs to develop. Like the government securities market, the state bond market also needs to be more liquid. It needs to be more diversified. And more and more states should rely on the market. That will impose greater fiscal discipline also. Next slide. So this is again showing us the variation in issuance and secondary markets. What we saw in the previous slide was that the share of state development loans is hardly 5%. And even this 5% is accounted for by just a handful of states. It is just accounted for by 4 or 5 states, so the top 5 states accounted for 61% of the action or issuance that's happening in the primary market, and more than half of the secondary market trading is also just accounted by 5 states. So this shows wide dispersion. It shows wide variation in the reliance of the various states on the bond market and how their securities are being traded. So there is greater attractiveness or greater interest in only a handful of state securities. So in terms of primary market, so we know that in the primary market, the states issue bonds, and the RBI is the debt manager. So the RBI issues bonds on behalf of the state, and there is auction. So the action that is happening is just for 4 states, that is Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, and Rajasthan. These are the states which are the top 4 borrowers during the first quarter, which is April to June of the current financial year. Even in terms of secondary market, as I said, that it's just it's concentrated in a very handful states. Just if you look at just 4 states, the papers in other words, the securities of these 4 states, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, and Andhra Pradesh, these are the most liquid. These are the securities which are being traded. The other state securities are held to maturity. They are illiquid. So this is another pertinent problem with the state's bond market that requires policy attention, because normally we talk about the central government bond market, but we do not talk about the state's bond market. And this is something which is important because we are concerned about the general government debt. We are concerned about the overall fiscal deficit, not just the central government fiscal deficit. So in that case, as the state's borrowing requirements are rising, they also need to have access to a deep and liquid bond market. But in terms of what the data is telling us, that it's highly concentrated in only a couple of states for both the primary market as well as secondary market. Next slide, please. So first issue, as we discussed, is relating to the bond market, that it is it's not very liquid as compared to the central government bond market. The other important issue is the off-budget liabilities, which is the liabilities which are not reflected in the budgets of state governments, but they do impose a burden and they have to be paid later on. So it's not getting reflected now, but it hampers the intergenerational equity and it has to be paid later on. So in some cases, it does mask the overall extent of debt and deficit. And we have seen that many states have been resorting to off-budget liabilities in order to circumvent the debt and deficit limits which are imposed in terms of their fiscal responsibility legislation. And there has been a lot of discussion on off-budget liabilities for both the central and the state government. But if we look at central government, they have been able to address this issue. Since COVID time, we have seen that most of the liabilities have become more transparent and they have been brought from off budget to on budget. So there used to be a sheet which is in the budget of central government. It's called the extra budgetary resources. It used to tell us about the extent of off-budget liabilities. And if we now look at that, the extent of off-budget liabilities are much smaller as compared to what they used to be before COVID, around 2017, 18, 2018, 19. There were some estimates that fiscal deficit is being understated by almost 2 to 3%. So that was the extent of off-budget liabilities. And just for our understanding, let's take an example of what is off-budget liabilities for central government. So one of the major source of off-budget liability is used to be by the Food Corporation of India, because if you know what Food Corporation of India does, is that it procures food grains from farmers at a higher price, and it provides these food grains to BPL families at a lower price. So this difference between what it is paying to farmers and what it is getting from the BPL families used to be the food subsidy. Now, this is something which the central government is expected to finance for the running of the Food Corporation of India. But what used to happen a couple of years back was that central government never used to provide the full extent of subsidy. It used to provide, say, a small amount, and for the rest, it used to ask the Food Corporation of India to go and borrow. So the Food Corporation of India used to borrow from NSSF, which is National Small Saving Fund, where all our small savings like PPF and all these small savings are kept. So there was a lot of borrowing happening from the NSSF, that is the National Small Saving Fund, by the FCI, which is not correct, because typically that is something which is for which the government is supposed to be the custodian and not borrow from there. So there was a lot of discussion, there were a lot of reports by the CAG saying that this practice must stop. And since then, we have seen that the extent of off-budget liabilities for central government has come down. But for state government, it continues to be, till last year, it was a problem. Next slide, please. So yes, for particularly for southern states, there is a huge burden of off-budget liabilities. States like Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, Kerala, they account for almost 93% of the overall states off-budget liabilities. That means they are asking their PSUs, they are asking their wholly owned subsidiaries or units to borrow either from foreign markets or from domestic markets or through the issuance of special securities. So that is what is happening, and therefore the deficit that is being reported in the budget is actually not that is not representing the true picture of the finances of states, and therefore the government came heavily on the states also. And last year in May, the government issued guidelines to make the off-budget liabilities also more transparent. by virtue of saying that all your off-budget liabilities should be part of your borrowing target for the current year. Because we know that Finance Commission fixes the target, and Article 293 Clause 3 of the Constitution requires that for every borrowing, the states must take permission from the central government if they are indebted to the central government. So with this power, the central government laid down certain guidelines saying that in a span of 4 years, you have to bring all your off-budget liabilities on budget, and then only you will be able to borrow more. So as a result, off-budget liabilities encouragingly have come down even for the state governments, and they have come down to a great extent, but still their off-budget liabilities are there. But going forward, the states have got 4 years, that is till March 2026, to adjust their off-budget liabilities and make them part of the overall borrowings for the financial year. So in other words, bringing off-budget on budget, they have got 4 years to do this. So gradually we are seeing that the off-budget liabilities problem is being addressed by both the central and the state governments, which is a welcome step. Next slide, please. So this is just to show you the state-wise off-budget borrowings. This is again from the CAG, and it is showing that there are a few states where the magnitude of off-budget liabilities is very large, particularly Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Tamil Nadu. So these are some of the states where Kerala, Karnataka, these are some of the states where off-budget borrowing is large, because now it is at least being reported. So that is a positive step. And going forward, when the off-budget borrowings will totally become part of the on-budget borrowings, then the fiscal deficit that we see, 3.5% or 4% of GSDP, that will actually be the correct representation of the deficits. Right now, it may not be, because for say Andhra Pradesh, another institution, Andhra Pradesh state level, state supplies is borrowing a lot from the market, and that is not being correctly reflected on the Andhra Pradesh budget. So with these efforts at cleaning the budget statements of the various states, the fiscal deficit and the debt will become a more reliable indicator. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes, so now we come to the third main problem, which is the borrowings by states. So states' outstanding liabilities, this is the target given by the Finance Commission. So as I said, that FRPM has not been amended after COVID. Sorry, previous slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So we are getting the guidepost on the liabilities and fiscal deficit from the Finance Commission. So the Finance Commission has given a glide path of the outstanding liabilities and outstanding debt of state government. So according to the 15th Finance Commission, the state's outstanding liabilities is expected to improve from 33% of GDP in 2020-21 to 32.5% by 2025-26. So this is what is expected. This is a very gradual glide path. We know that the Singh committee also gave some recommendations about debt for both the central and state government. And relatedly, this is coming from the Finance Commission, where we see that the outstanding liabilities is expected to improve. This is what the states are expected to do. But what is the actual position? That is, we'll see the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the outstanding liabilities. That means the overall borrowings of the states from the markets as well as non-market sources, expressed as a percentage of GSDP. So here what we see is that, so currently what they are expected to do, the states should have an outstanding liabilities of something between 32 to 33% of GSDP. But we see that there are a couple of states where the outstanding liabilities is way too much. Like consider states like Punjab, where the outstanding liability, and this is B, this is budget estimate. They have estimated the outstanding liabilities to be 47.6% of GSDP. Similarly, Rajasthan, 40%. Himachal Pradesh 41.9%. So and then there are some small states like Mizoram where there's 53. But if we focus on the big states, states like Punjab, states like Rajasthan, these are states, and Himachal Pradesh, these are states where outstanding liabilities is exceeding the glide path which has been laid by the 15th Finance Commission, and it exposes them to vulnerabilities, because if your debt stock is more, and then if such states go and borrow in the bond market, they will not find much borrowers because they are not fiscally disciplined. So that exposes them to fiscal vulnerability. Even if they are able to borrow, they will be able to borrow at a higher cost. So that is a problem. It will create a domino impact in the sense that interest payments will be a greater proportion of the overall expenditure, and that will lead to squeezing of capital expenditure. So even the Reserve Bank of India came up with this report on risk analysis, where they have identified 5-6 problematic states based on how much debt and deficits they have. And these are some of the states, as I mentioned, Punjab, Rajasthan, where on the parameter of debt, they are doing badly. And look at Punjab. Consistently, its outstanding liabilities has been much more than what is expected out of the trajectory laid out by the Finance Commission. So that means that they are spending more on freebies, they are spending more on revenue expenditures, they are spending more on subsidies, that is squeezing their expenditure for capex, and consistently their liabilities are quite elevated and on the higher side. So, and on the other side, state like Gujarat has been doing well. Its outstanding liability is just 19.5%. And this you can link very nicely with what we saw in the state's bond market, where Gujarat securities are being traded because it's not a heavily indebted state. So investors also look at this parameter to decide where they are going to invest their money in terms of the state's bond. So if we have this much variation, obviously the states which are doing better in terms of liabilities will have a greater participation of investors. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the last point. Another source of vulnerability. One vulnerability we talked about is the off-budget liabilities. We talked about the shallowness of the state's bond market. We spoke about the outstanding liabilities. And the last thing is, what is the state's own tax revenues? Because greater reliance on the central government grants and the central government tax devolution is okay, but over a period of time, the states should develop the capacity to finance greater proportion of their expenditure from their own tax revenue. So what is the proportion of own tax revenue as a share of the overall tax revenue? Because as I said, tax revenue consists of the state's own tax revenue, what they are getting from levying VAT, levying stamp duty, taxes on land, etc., GST, that is own tax revenue, and they get some share from the central government based on the recommendations of the Finance Commission, which is again horizontally distributed among states based on certain criteria like population, like tax effort, like demography, and so on. So if we look at that, Haryana is doing well, because out of the overall tax revenue of Haryana, 87% is its own taxes. So that means it makes it more independent in terms of financing its expenditure, in terms of controlling its fiscal deficit. At least on this parameter, it's doing well. And compare and contrast with a state like Bihar, where own tax revenue is just 32% of its overall tax revenue. That means the rest is coming from the central government. It's hugely dependent on the central government for its grants, and its own tax revenues are a very small proportion of the overall tax revenue. So this is another problem which is highlighted Another issue which is highlighted for the state finances, that gradually the state should have the capacity to depend to increase their own tax revenue, to increase the buoyancy of their own tax revenue, and to increase the share of own tax revenue as a percentage of their overall tax revenue. And we see that some of the states are doing well, where at least more than 75% of the tax revenue is being accounted for by own tax revenue. But then there are some other states, like starting from West Bengal, where the share consistently is lower. It's not increasing also over time. So that is a problem, which is again a source of fiscal vulnerability, which requires to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your insights with us. Before we move on to the Q&A session, I would like to invite Professor Mukul to share his views. Over to you, sir.
Just a short comment. This is a very, very fact-filled and nuanced presentation. I like your discipline in speaking, the words you use, elevator, and so on. And you are bringing public policy dialogue to a higher level. And I hope that the participants learn from you about how to make a presentation in a nuanced, mature, fact-filled manner. It's all data. And you have pointed out limitations of the data as well, which we need to improve. Now we are in the process of having 16th Finance Commission being announced.
Yes.
So everybody would be looking forward to that, because they will have a lot of challenges of the types that you have mentioned.
Yes.
Thank you. If you don't mind, you could share your presentation with me.
Sure, sure.
I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
Any Q&A?
And so far, if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand or type them in the Q&A box. You can wait for 10-15 seconds.
Tejas ji has raised a question earlier. Tejas ji, would you like to? Okay, it's not here.
Not here, sir.
Okay, if any other participant want to raise any question, you can just. Let's see.
Seeing none, sir, I think we can wrap up today's session.
We can go for a closing remarks by Professor Asher. Thank you, Radhika.
I think
Most welcome. Thank you for having me.
One of the important things we learned from the first presentation is how important data are going to be. So the adage that data is new oil, and like any oil is worthless if it is underground and you have not invested in harnessing it. So data has to be harnessed, they have to be used, competency, mindset has to be there. And as Radhika's presentation showed, there are a lot of data, we can improve it, but there are still that we can make use of. And one of the things that I always used to get slightly disappointed when I taught many government officials from Asian countries in my class over the years is that a lot of them would present without data, without knowing, and they were not very comfortable with numerical literacy, nuances, and so on. They can speak in vague generalities, nice words, but data. And I think when we talk about from change to transformation, data and mastery, or at least competence in using the data, is going to be very, very important in the future. And the second point that came out is that how India is a federal country. I mean, not quite like US federal country. In US federalism, a state has right to secede.
Right.
That's where the Civil War was fought. In India, state has no such right. State cannot go out of the Indian Union. So it's a bit different, but the variations, and as we saw in the demographic presentation, many of these states are in the Gangetic plain, and that Gangetic plain, Bihar, Punjab, others, they need to be raised. Their performance needs to be raised for the overall India performance to improve. So it's not good, it's not healthy for the country to have 2 or 3 stars, Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu or Gujarat. We need a lot of growth node stars. Fortunately, UP is coming up very well. And in 5 years, we'll see hopefully some change if the present trajectory continues. And this is the quality of public policy dialogue that we should continue to maintain. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your closing remarks. And thank you so much, Mark, for such a wonderful session. With that, we come to an end of day 6 of a 1-month immersive online intermediate certificate training course on contours of the public policy in India in the Amrit Kaal. I, Tripta Behra, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, Center for the Study of Finance and Economics, CSFE, New Delhi. We are grateful to our experts for day 6 of this course. Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay, Professor Mukul and Dr. Radhika Pandey, for taking out their valuable time and giving an opportunity to the participants to learn from this online certificate program. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We look forward to welcoming you tomorrow, that is 23rd September at 6 p.m. for the 7th day of this certification course by distinguished experts, Mr. Harsh Gupta Madhusudan and Ambassador Shashank. We are grateful if you are watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.